This video was made possible by the Eliason Group, an Agile consulting service. You can locate the video under Follow Us, then select Recent Videos on YouTube on the agilenewengland.org website.
Something called a lean coffee. So you get to ask any question you want to this beautiful panel of people. So we've got about 55 minutes right now to entertain this amazing panel with your questions. We're going to do it sort of like a lean coffee. I think most people have maybe a little pad of Post-its, maybe a marker. If you don't and you want one, we're actually going to do some of this over here on this whiteboard. We've got a whole bunch more Post-its and markers over here. So you can come grab one if you want one. We're going to do a lean coffee. This is what lean coffee is. Here's the story of lean coffee. Once upon a time, it's a story, so it starts with once upon a time. Once upon a time, in a magical, faraway place called Seattle, there was a group of people who were lean software enthusiasts. They loved lean software so much. You know, it's sort of like Agile software. It's the same kinds of ideas and principles. They loved lean software development so much that they decided to meet together once a week and talk about it. It was Seattle, so they got together at a coffee place. This is why it's called lean coffee. They got together once a week for about an hour, and they were lean software people, so they came up with a very efficient way to have the most valuable conversations possible in the least amount of time. Here's the process they used. It always started like this. If somebody had a question to ask, they would write it down on a Post-it. We've got a nice panel here. So pause on the story, time out on the story. We've got this great panel here of experienced Agilists. Do you have a question that you want the answer to? A question about Agile? A question about any of these people? Anything at all, actually. This is really ask me anything to the panel. What is bugging you about Agile? What do you want to know about Agile? What's not working where you work? What are you hoping could go better? What advice do you want from somebody with a lot of experience? What's the most important question that you have about Agile right now? Write down that question on a Post-it. You can even write down more than one question, but use more than one Post-it. We'll set up right now, we'll say we have a 2-minute time box. They're lean software people, they love time boxes. We have a 2-minute time box starting right now for everybody in the room to write down their one most important question, their 2 or 3 most important questions about Agile. Any questions about what we're doing right now? Yeah?
Could the panel introduce themselves individually?
Sure, let's do that.
Thank you.
One at a time. Everybody has a 15-second time box to introduce yourselves.
Ethan Strominger, retired, but doing a lot of volunteering and on the board of Agile New England, and excited about development practices.
I'm Tom Woundy. I'm past president of Agile New England. I'm an Agile coach for Mentor Graphics.
David Kramer. I'm on the board of Agile New England, director of IT, do all the IT stuff. During the day, I'm normally a software engineering manager, heavy on the technical side, looking to transition to Agile coaching, also on the technical side.
I'm Steve Jaccaud. People call me Jaccaud, and that's not a derogatory thing. I'm an Agile coach at Spotify and a musician, and I've been kind of hanging around these guys maybe for about 4 years now.
And organizer for Kendall Square Agilists, too.
Sometimes. He helps out. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes helpful.
My name is Matt Baker. I'm a software architect at a company called Pluralsight, and I also coach teams there occasionally. I'm new to Boston. I've been getting to know Ethan and who've been co-hosting the Boston Crafters meetup.
Lizette Morris, Agile coach at Athena Health, based in Watertown, and outside of that, I'm a theatrical artist.
Tom Taylor, I'm an Agile project manager at Foundation Medicine. Used to be here at PEGA, so I think I helped bring the Kendall Square Agilist under the PEGA roof. We've co-hosted over now at Foundation as well. Working as an Agile project manager, there's a vector of which I'm working in supporting teams directly, but also sort of Trojan horse style, bringing the Agile to the organization as a whole.
All right, so there's our intros. What questions do you have for these awesome people? And what's the most important question that you have about Agile? 2 minutes to write down your question. Go. There's a step that we're going to skip from canonical lean coffee. From here, people usually dot vote and order the questions to get a sense of which questions are most important to most of the people in the room. I'm going to skip that right now, just in the interest of time. We don't have as much time left as we hope. But these were lean people, so the next thing they did is they set up a Kanban board to keep track of what's going on. We've got this big list of questions to ask. We're going to answer one question at a time. Turns out that's a really good way to answer questions. And we're going to keep track of the questions that we've answered. We'll have, I think we'll try it. We'll see what happens. We can inspect and adapt as we go. We'll have a 4-minute time box for each question. I'm going to pick a random question to start with. And while they're answering, I'm going to look for the next question that I think would be interesting to everybody in the room. So, our random question. Hey, team forming. How to form teams. Do teams need tech leads? Dear panel, what do you think? How to form teams. Do teams need tech leads? What else about team formation?
You guys are running out of time.
Maybe we could just start here.
So I guess like the first thing that I'm jumping on is the tech lead thing, because I have a knee-jerk reaction to it. At my organization, I feel like tech lead translates to person on the team that makes all of the technical decisions and everyone else on the team sort of executes. And I'm hoping for tech leads to take more of an educational and cross-training approach. So I think, yes, it's fine and great to have a tech lead because having expertise locally on the team is awesome, as long as they're making sure that everyone else is also becoming an expert along the way.
I'll agree strongly with what you're saying, but I'll add that it kind of has to be a knowledge management role too. It has to be a knowledge radiator and like communicating what the norms are. And by the way, we've already solved this problem in the group kind of stuff. The other thing that I'll talk about is a lot of people are talking about cross-functional teams, full-stack teams, as a way of solving the problem of inter-team dependencies, and that can be great, but often having things done by different teams is a good thing. For instance, I've talked to companies where there's no QA and developers test the developer stuff, and maybe that's okay, but it's never okay for you to be the tester of your own code. And that's happening at some companies, and that's not good.
So my first snarky answer to that is going to be, it depends, right? Which is the go-to in the Agile. I would point people to the Tuckman model of, what is it, forming, norming, performing.
Yeah.
Because I think teams are going to go through that, and it's pretty well documented that that's the normal run of things. The other thing I would recommend looking at early and proactively is 5 dysfunctions of a team. So call out what are the pitfalls to avoid as teams.
The thing that a lot of, at least in my experience, a lot of companies will hastily throw together teams based on who people work for, rather than based on cross-functionality. And my best advice is, if you can get people to opt into teams, that would be wonderful. But if you work in a large structure, you may not have that luxury. At least if you can watch from the outside let these teams work for a little while and start looking for dependencies. When you see the dependencies, it means you need to reshuffle the deck. And not be afraid of doing that. Just because this person reports to this manager, yes, they can be on this team with these other people that work for another manager. It's okay. You know, it's a challenge, at least in my environment. But anything you can do to minimize those dependencies, that's what I would watch for. And you never get it right the first time. If you're kind of having to force fit people into teams, it usually doesn't. It sounds like it'll work, but let it sit for a few months and see whether the dependencies are.
Yeah, you did mention opt-in, and something that a lot of companies do is they let people say, hey, what team do you want to be on? And that can be really beneficial for buy-in and employee empowerment. If people are cross-functional and full stack enough that you have the coverage that you need on the team.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe this is more of a semantics game, but I tend to think that things need to be managed, time, money, widgets, scope need to be managed. So maybe they need it, maybe they don't.
One of the things they do in real Kanban boards is they have an agreed upon condition for moving into the next column. For lean coffee, the condition is usually the person who asked the question gets to decide whether we're done with it. Who asked that? Are we done?
Is that where you want to comment?
Answered.
Judge, jury,
Next. 2 count. What are the differences between the major Agile job titles? First, what are they? And then what are the differences?
Who wants to start?
Let's start.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Again, easy answer. Scrum Guide tells you what those job functions are relative to Scrum. If we're talking about a product owner, a Scrum Master, or specifically the dev team. I think we need just to look at that source to see what those answers are. It gets mushier if you sort of take Agile as a philosophy or a mindset, because there are no roles of mindset. Kanban doesn't prescribe roles. In fact, they're very explicit about not messing with existing roles when you first start. So we're back to my it depends answer.
Yeah, I don't care what you call me, right? Like, I'm just going to cause some trouble and hope for the best, usually.
Senior troublemaker.
Yeah, senior troublemaker.
Yeah, I like the egalitarian. If you have titles, they're just sort of equal. You tend to shy away from this is your title, this is your role, and then especially if you start packing authority into that, I prefer just uniform titles if I can get away with it.
The major, oh, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say the major distinction that I try to make is that if you're talking about product owner and Scrum Master, the product owner is focusing on what problem the team is trying to solve, and the Scrum Master is focused on how to empower the team to solve it to the best of their ability by unblocking them and protecting them from distraction.
I think it's important for everybody to be focused on the full value stream. So the product management can't just be thinking about the product, they need to be thinking about resources. Project management has to be thinking about technical dependencies and stuff like that. But a lot of groups sometimes fall into political problems and battles, and who has the right to make that kind of decision? And at that point, it's sometimes going to be important to have clearly defined, responsibilities and roles, especially between, product management, project management, for companies where that still exists, and the dev team.
The awesome thing about time boxes is it's a maximum amount of time, not a minimum. Whose question is that? Are you satisfied? Is there anything else you want to add?
Like product owner versus product manager?
What I've heard, because I've been doing a lot of research on what the difference is between those titles, is that the product manager is more figuring out the higher level roadmap, and the product owner is more focused on the lower level details and being able to answer the questions about requirements for particular stories or features or epics.
Company Pragmatic Marketing has a great matrix of what is in scope for product management, competitive intelligence, sales support, all these other vectors and functions that go on within that wider scheme. Product ownership is a thinner slice within that domain. So it may be a place to go for more answers. You can answer 24/7.
So,
Say that name again?
Pragmatic marketing.
Okay.
So I will say, in the case of like product owner versus product manager, there's generally this rule where you should have one product owner. There needs to be one voice of, what you're creating. And even having those two levels can cause conflict.
What is the biggest obstacle you have observed introducing Agile into an organization? What's your biggest obstacle that you've noticed?
Ooh, lack of sponsorship.
Yeah.
I would
Say
say
more about like sponsorship?
No, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, we want all of this Agile. We want all of this something, whatever it is that maybe your executives are kind of chasing, but they don't really have the appetite for any change, or want to put any money towards it, or actually put any kind of sponsorship towards it. I've seen that happen in several companies, and it's just really a shame.
Yeah. I'll add a slightly different angle to the same thing, which is I've seen managers, it's not that they're afraid of change, but they're afraid of giving up control. Even if giving up control would lead to better results. I've worked for quite a few smaller companies that were still growing, and they haven't gotten past that adolescence of being able to actually delegate to line level managers. Recent company I worked at, the CTO was telling us what database column name should be called. That level of micromanagement, and never got past that.
So I've seen like two phenomena that kind of, it's all around management, but one is the executive manager who's basically playing like an armchair quarterback. So they think this is something to fix your problem. I have a problem with these people, they're not executing on their work. So go fix them. Rather than it being, what do we all have to do together to change and mirror the desired outcomes they would like the people that work for them to actually embrace, because they don't embrace it themselves. So why would anybody follow if they don't have a role, that they're not acting as role models for it? And the other thing I see is in working in a larger companies, middle management, I think often gets ignored when you're trying to do a large adoption, because they're the ones that probably feel the most at risk. They're not going to feel safe because, well, what just happens by job now? So it's something that if you're going to go through an adoption, make sure you have a very, very careful plan in place. How do we help our middle management go through it? Because if not, what I've seen is the behaviors they'll just kind of figure out, how do I fit this Agile on top of how I do work daily, rather than how do we transform ourselves into something different. They just try to make both of them work, and they're in direct conflict. And then they don't like their job, and then everything's always a fight to get growth within the teams.
Piggybacking on your large organization comment, so I think we struggle with iterating on the choices that we made a year and a half ago in terms of the overall transformation. Like, we would have put out guidance about how to do certain things, and this is how we're applying Agile and Scrum at our organization, and then realizing farther down the line that maybe there's room to improve on that original recommendation, but changing course has proven to be really difficult. I think the second thing, if I can do a second thing, is sort of people really getting stuck on tools. Every time someone comes into office hours and their question is about Jira, my heart just like crumbles a little more.
So I do want to counterbalance that a little. It is very important to recognize when something is a people problem or a tools problem, but it is true a lot of times not having a good tool chain that can turn around stuff quickly is the obstacle to getting stuff out quicker, and not having the CI/CD, having a defined release process.
I do have a time to.
Yeah, that's my question.
What do you think? Are you satisfied?
It was great.
Satisfied customer, bring him on. We're up now. Smoking.
So here's another question, dear panel. When starting an Agile transition, how do you deal with fears from people who believe their jobs might be eliminated?
More fear.
For example, project managers, program managers, sometimes they're afraid that their job will be eliminated. So when you're starting an Agile transition, how do you effectively handle those fears that people have?
I think it has to start with the business impetus. Like, there's got to be a reason why you're doing any change, a transformation, transition, whatever you want to call it. Like, it has to start with a reason, and usually that reason is something like, if we don't deliver valuable working software more frequently and sooner than our competitors can, our lunch is going to get eaten. So it kind of starts from somewhere like that, I feel, and if your company hasn't bridged that gap where they're able to explain that to everybody up and down the company, then, you know, trying to transition, transform, adopt, whatever, just gets gnarly anyway, so that kind of aids the fear.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, yeah, it's got to kind of start there.
I think you need a vision set by your leadership. I'm impressed more and more how it needs to be emanating from your leaders. And it should be their responsibility to say, everyone here, this is where you will be in our new transformation or whatever it is. Assuage those fears and then say it until you're sick of saying it.
Yeah, I tend to agree that starting at the top would work so much better, because my experience is I'm working in an organization where we kind of started sort of in the middle and down. And so you could get all these team members together and train them, and they'll be like, oh yes, we'll do this Scrum stuff, it's great, until their manager or somebody up above sends a mail that completely derails everything you just spent 2 days teaching them. Right? So it can be immediately at odds.
It's not
You
like
can get, if you can get that vision and that investment coming top down, and that they're mirroring behavior themselves, it's going to be so much easier to follow, for them to follow.
And it's not like those competencies go away, right? I mean,
No,
you
absolutely
transform
not.
Agile, you still need project management competencies, you still need leadership competencies, manager competencies. You know, those don't go away.
Yeah,
To that
they're valuable people, so that, you know, hopefully, if they've been working there for a while,
Yeah.
for a really good reason, because they're adding value, so maybe just they get a different title or.
Right.
shuffle
One
around.
of the things that comes out of the classic project management world is the researcher. And you're like, well, it's not one of my favorite things. There's value in it, particularly in a transformation. If people are comfortable with racing, it's a way to create role alignment between what is your job, where do you fit in terms of this responsible, accountable, consultative, or informed modality. So something to think about leveraging that.
I was talking about this in a job interview that I had recently for a very large company, and they had tons and tons and tons of these like middle-level managers and middle-level people that you know, it wasn't clear that there was going to be a place for them. And so there was a lot of talk about like what of their skills were portable to what their new roles are, but kind of what he told me, I don't think he told them this, but he told me this, that it became very clear that there was a very easy to discern people who were in that situation and could adapt to a new role, and people that were just, you know, this is what I do and this is my box, and I'm not comfortable transitioning to another role. Or, you know, if my job title looks like it's lower on the org chart, that's unacceptable to me, even if I'm in just as an important role. And sometimes you just have to let people not move into the new system. Throw in one more thing. So I'm actually reading Nancy Van Schoenderwert's new book right now. One of the things that I got out of that about, yes, C. Card. And one of the things in there is everybody in the organization has to be focused on the organizational mission, and I think we talked a little about that before. And adapting to how the company changes is part of focusing on the company's mission. You have to give people opportunity to improve themselves. So you can't just assume that this person will never adapt.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question to your panel. What do you do to keep it fun?
Oh.
Wait, we're supposed to have fun.
Yeah, so this is another question that I'm kind of sensitive to, because it's going to be very dependent upon the position. So one of the things that I fell into during my employment is this group, which up until recently now no longer exists, called People Stack. This woman, Jen Bump, got this brilliant idea. Let's form a group of people who manage technical people, because that's got very peculiar problems. One of the things that we had, one meeting that we had was on, keeping things diverse, keeping things, gender diverse, background diverse, et cetera, and how do you do that? And one of the topics that we came up with is like, if you want to attract diversity, it has to start like all the way to like what your website looks like, how the jobs are that you advertise. So sometimes you look at a job and it'll be like, oh, we have barbecues and we go on baseball games and stuff like that. I'm like, maybe you're not going to get a very diverse crowd if that's what you're going with as you're advertising the foosball table in the kitchen. So part of it has to be, what's going to be fun for a wider array of people. If diversity is important to you, that's got to be included in part of the changes.
Team names, rituals, he presented and talked a lot about ritual. There's a team here at PEGA. They were the first Scrum team. Their name is the Flying Toasters after that original screensaver.
Nice.
The guys on that team, they're all avid Magic the Gathering players. So they name their sprints after Magic cards. They have fun, and yet they get their work done. And I think for having that sense of team identity and that sense of fun, it creates a sense of unity that systems are built.
I think, so that kind of leads to, if you want to create a fun atmosphere, part of that has to be asking them what's fun, giving them autonomy to do the kind of stuff that they want to do, and actually supporting it. I have a friend who, upper management in her company, went on some summit someplace rich, and came back, and there was all these companies talking about these women's focus groups that they had. And so they said, well, we need a women's focus group. So they found some, woman that would likely to lead it, and they say, we want you to start our women's focus group. And she's like, well, will I have a budget? What for? Will there be sponsorship from upper management? So what for? There was no empowerment behind it. There was no actual reason. They didn't care. They just, they wanted a women's group, just like some companies want to do Agile. So there has to be actual support for people to do that kind of stuff.
What I think is fun is delivering valuable working software. So anything you can do that gets you a little closer to that, I think is really fun. It's so fun. So let's do that.
Well, you can have fun ways of recognizing good work.
Oh, yeah.
I like, for the technical people, I like to have sessions where we unplug from anything work-related, and we'll do coding games or something like that. We'll spend an afternoon writing some dinky little program or doing a code kata or something, and that seems to reinvigorate people that happen to like to write code.
At Spotify, we have a hack week once a year that's company-wide, and in my tribe business unit, we have 2 hack days per month as well. So that's been good for teams.
Who asked? What do you think?
Pretty good.
Let's
start.
Are you satisfied?
Richard, do we want to do the profession?
I'm not sure we get any farther.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Now, I've heard Agile is partly about helping teams be awesome. So what about individual promotions and individual bonuses? How does that work where you work?
So, okay. So we had a speaker that spoke Agile in the past. Jürgen Appelo. Appelo. There's a book called Managing for Happiness. Go buy that book, and it will give you lots of ideas. My company doesn't follow it. But there's a lot of really interesting ideas about incentivizing teams, bonus, like alternate ways to do bonusing that he's learned empirically with experiments to try to find ways to have more equity in how the wealth, I guess you could say, is distributed within teams.
So if you read up on this, you see a lot of people, pundits, talking about how there shouldn't be individual bonuses at all, that the team should be evaluated as a team and rewarded as a team. I don't think that works given human nature, personally. I don't see, I see an awful lot of people in some companies that are trying to do maybe not as little as possible, but they certainly don't feel motivated to go that extra mile if they're not going to directly benefit from it. And again, different people have different motivations and stuff like that. But what I would say, and I certainly don't see the way that pay and performance work in the United States changing drastically anytime soon. It's not going to happen. But what you can do is smaller effective tweaks like having as people's performance review how well they supported the team. If you've got like one developer that's cranking out 80 story points a sprint and everybody else is doing 20, but QA can only test a third of it, he's not actually delivering value to the customer. If you've got other people that are needing help and he's cranking out all this stuff that's just kind of piling up on somebody else's desk. So asking people, how often does this person, step up and help out with customer stuff? How often does this person help newbies get up to speed on the team? Things like that, and value supporting the team. It's a small, reasonable step that can make a very big difference.
Yeah, so my organization is definitely guilty of, I think, promoting heroism through our incentivization structure. I have seen some success at like a product zone and team level where individual managers or leaders of whole areas will create smaller incentives that are based on what did you contribute to the team, how did you help someone else learn, things like that, but has not spread much farther than those little micro areas.
Maybe kind of depends too on what kind of behaviors you actually want to encourage throughout your organization. If you want to encourage like lone wolves and rock stars and individual contributors over, like teams who actually work together, then, then that's, I guess, one way to do that is, individual. But yeah, I think David's right. It's that structure in the Western world is probably not going to change overnight. But, I don't know, being aware of it at least be good.
Changing what metrics go on that performance review is a smaller fix than changing performance reviews at all. Another huge one, which is also be easier to do, would simply be doing them more often. It's absolutely insane to tell somebody how they're doing once a year. Even quarterly would be a huge improvement, and that's a relatively small fix. And even if you're not able to do that at the upper levels, you can have somewhat formal ones that don't get reported up, but just making it a point of doing one-on-one meetings, making it a point of, having these, touchstones of like, where are you on your goals for the year, every couple of months can make a really big difference.
One quick follow-up question.
Yeah, well, it's a comment. I've been the VP of Engineering at Carbon. In both cases, 90% of your bonus was tied to the team goals. And yes, we pounded the table, and we pounded the table with management, but it really does make for very happy places. So it's not impossible. Both teams had over 100 engineers. So just want to say it can happen, and if you get to Agile at scale, and you have HR on your team, and you train them about Agile, you can, it's not impossible, there's hope out there.
That's good to hear, yeah.
Whose questions were these?
What's wrong with that?
If you've recommended a book, will you write it down on a piece of paper and say,
Management 3.0.
He was, well, that book's good too, but.
Management for happiness.
Yeah.
I'm not taking notes.
Our next question, dear panelists. How does a Scrum Master grow up to become an Agile coach?
No, yeah, that's not a.
I couldn't.
Can I take that one for just a quick second? I actually take issue to that, like there's some kind of progression. I believe that Scrum Masters have a very specific role to play in a shop that is using Scrum successfully to actually gain value in their development and delivery practices. But an Agile coach is, to me, not the same, nor is it a something you ascend to be or something like that. Different competencies. I believe different competencies. So anytime I kind of hear that, hey, how do I, go from one to the other? You can be both. You could be neither. You could be one or the other back and forth in your career, and it's not like a better, worse kind of deal.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think that if you're someone who's more satisfied by being a part of a group that's delivering, stay a Scrum Master or become a Scrum Master. We were just talking before about the inherent frustration that comes with being a coach, because you spend a lot of time watching people actively ignore your advice. So it's very different.
So I put it up on the board, coaching Agile teams, these teams, it's a huge record.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good.
yeah, I was actually going to mention that because I just started reading that. And she addressed this by saying a Scrum Master is more focused on one team, and an Agile coach is focused on multiple teams. I don't know if I go along with that definition, but that's what she said in her book.
Tobias Meyer and Jem Damal have a post that's findable, searchable on LinkedIn. That talks about, the Scrum Master wanting to be an Agile coach as being kind of like a jumped up, self-inflated kind of thing. It's a very interesting and highly entertaining piece if you can find it.
I think they have a post on that.
Yeah.
Who asked? Are you satisfied?
In a way. And it's interesting that Steve and I went to a coaching camp together. It's more about how do you have a greater influence if you want to have that greater influence.
Man, yeah, that's
And
like
so,
topic
and it's a
of-
more fundamental question.
Yeah. Influencing
So-
without authority and.
Yeah.
Or enjoying the team, but wanting to spread that goodness.
I mean, yeah, I'll say like as a coach now, I feel way less connected to teams sometimes, and that bothers me sometimes. When I was a Scrum Master, it was great. I was like in the thick of it, and really helping the teams directly more. So. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Should we miss it?
my gut answer to that question of like what's the difference is that the Scrum Master is kind of the conductor of the train, and actually running the process and removing obstacles and making sure that everybody knows everything. And the Agile coach is more about setting the process and making sure the process is being followed and updating the process as needed. But back to that angle that you were talking about can't control without authority and stuff like that. Sometimes that can be really powerful if you're able to get respect from the team and from the people in other groups, and you can get that. Often it's a way of blaming, upper management blaming people for not doing stuff that they haven't been empowered to do.
One of the
So I think you gotta be
vectors,
careful of that.
one of the vectors that comes into play for the Agile coach function is to be a change agent. Right? And so exploring the different tools and techniques around change agency becomes kind of, I think, a way in. So there's some resources on the board.
Thank you.
Hey, we're gonna do something different. Lightning round. 1 minute time boxes. You can really help us with 1 minute time boxes.
Yep. Sorry, say that again?
Google for 1 minute timer. Oh, hold on, stop, reset, hold on.
Reset.
Let's ask the question first. Okay, 1 minute. What about balancing better feature development against technical debt? 1 minute, go.
I love this one, so I'll grab this one. We do at least 25% where I'm at now, and we just say, we inform the whole board, your engineering teams will always have technical debt, so we'll be paying it down at least 25% of the time. Some people do that 1 in every 4 cards, other teams take 1 day every week where they work on technical debt. We sometimes have our engineering leaders stand up and espouse how important paying down technical debt on a regular cadence is, and that really gives us the muscle we need to
That's
be
awesome.
doing it.
I've never worked in a company that gave us that too.
If you're working Scrum, get the PO on board with this so that they prioritize that.
Yeah, we've actually had POs that actually would come into their team and just say, 20% of your velocity is going to be expended on technical debt. You guys tell me what that technical debt is because you know it is better than me. And they're expected to prioritize and come in to the product owner with that list when they plan their sprints.
All right, lightning round continues. Next question in 1 minute. Do you need project managers if you have Scrum Masters?
Great question.
As long as companies expect long-term roadmaps, whether they're valuable or not, they expect them, then yes. Somebody needs to generate those 3-month, 6-month timelines, no matter how big a collection of lies it is.
Plus management and coordination around dependencies.
And there's also resource allocation, which is a real problem. Certainly before you have really many teams, or many teams.
Depends on if you're doing Scrum.
Well, resource allocation can be a problem in whatever system you use.
I'm referring to the question.
Sorry.
Do you need Scrum Masters? Because
Yes.
We run it as a Kanban team? No, not necessarily.
What about engineering managers as Scrum Masters? Is that a thing? Is that good? Is that bad? What do
I
you
think so.
I would, to personal experience, I would say it's probably far better to have them be a Scrum Master than try to be the product owner.
So as a software engineering manager, when I can be, I would say a lot of my focus is on the one-on-ones and making sure that I'm listening to the people that work for me and make sure that they're getting what they need out of it, employee satisfaction, but also making sure that the company's getting out of them what they need. And the value in there is the empathy on both sides. I don't, having this, I don't think the manager needs to be directing their work. I think the manager needs to be directing their relationship with the company and the teams. And I see that as being that's still very valuable.
Next lightning round question. What is the biggest pain point you've noticed using Agile?
Weaponization.
Yeah,
That's all.
Managing to the metrics.
yeah.
We need more velocity from this business.
Yeah, management's misunderstanding or misapplication or mishandling or clumsiness around measuring for the wrong behaviors. Yeah.
Oppressive standardization.
A metaphor I like is, we use rulers to measure things, but,
Yeah.
ruler gets used to whack them on the wrist when they're bad.
Yeah, also, yeah, like velocity or points, magical unicorn farts, or whatever you measure your relational estimation to is not a proxy for value being delivered. And I think sometimes, yeah, leadership might get in that way.
Forgetting the customer.
All right, next lightning round question. Have you ever discouraged or stopped a team from going Agile? And so why?
Yes, not Agile, but Scrum. If they don't have a product owner or a Scrum Master, or if one person is trying to play both of those roles at the same time, they're just not setting themselves up for success.
I'd like to add to that. I almost thought you were going to say this, but a team that's horribly distributed. Specifically when it comes to Scrum. So if you have a team where you have one member in Russia, another one in India, another one on the West Coast, and one here in Boston, that is not going to make a Scrum team. I'm sorry. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, so there was one company where I worked at where they felt that certain classes of work and certain projects needed to be reprioritized literally every day. If different things are right, this is the most important thing, this is the most important thing. So what we ended up doing is moving those classes of work to a Kanban system, and we told them, play with the priorities of whatever you want, as long as it's still in this column.
Thank you very much. This will be our last question. What is your single best piece of advice for the people in the room? Everybody gets an answer. What's your single best piece of advice for these beautiful people in the room with us?
I think the biggest issue that teams end up facing is complacency. So my piece of advice is fight complacency.
Help people through their fear and encourage them to just try shit.
Probably embracing autonomy as much as you possibly can.
I'm going to say stop talking about teams in terms of performance. I hate that word because people are not sports cars, teams are not sports cars. People are very non-deterministic operating, ecosystems, and you can't apply performance, I don't think, to them. So, like from on high down, like stop thinking of that in terms of performance and how can you actually increase outcomes, deliver value.
Yeah, so Agile and Lean and all these things are very dependent upon feedback. And all of that breaks down if you're not honest with yourself and others and dealing with real numbers instead of, I feel this is up or this is down. It's got to be very reality-based and very honesty-based. Otherwise, the feedback system is, you're feeding it garbage.
Oh, no, see, time's up. All right, so what I would say is be a role model. If you want people to follow, then you should be doing it yourself. So if that means you're trying to work with a large organization, make sure that the people at the top are modeling the behavior they want everyone else to have. Not modeling it in a disingenuous way, but doing it really internally, and that it's genuine, that you're modeling that behavior.
So, Tom, Lizette, Matt, Steve, David, Tom, thank you very much for being our